welcome back to Book and Page. It's still Shakespeare. I need to pick a fun Shakespeare to do at some point. I need to pick a Shakespeare that's gonna make me feel good inside. So far, Winter's Tale's not it. Though I am appreciating Act 2, Scene 3, which will be our focus for today's video, a lot more. So it will probably be a shorter video. It is a shorter section we're covering, but some interesting things do happen. So overall, what happens in the scene? Well, Leontis gets confronted, at least. So that's good. No, we start the last scene in Act 2 with Leontis kind of by himself, mumbling about how he knew his wife was sleeping around and she's finally got. When a servant comes in, and it turns out Mamilius, their son, hasn't been feeling well. He's been very sick, he's not sleeping properly, he's not eating, and Leontis assumes that this is because now that his mother has been arrested, poor Mamilius is just so overwhelmed by how terrible his mother is. I think it's probably about the fact that his mother's been arrested by his father in the first place. But the servant assures Leontis that Mamilius is doing better. He's like, cool, go keep an eye on him. So apparently he still likes his son. Not so much for his daughter. The rest of the scene, well, plays out a little awkwardly. We have Paulina, so the lady that we met last video, bursting in, followed by her husband, Antigonus, and some other lords and servants of the court who are all like, the king didn't want to be disturbed, and certainly not by you, ya harpy. And she just bursts in, of course, carrying the baby that the queen has now had in prison. And she's just like, I don't care if he wants to talk to me, he's gonna listen. And she basically busts in on the king to just castigate him about everything he's doing. How he's put a good woman in jail, how he doesn't deserve her as a wife. She does, like, she has the kid, and she's like, look, the kid is obviously yours. And she points out all the similarities between the princess and the king. Basically drops the baby off and says, fix it, you crazy man. And isn't fazed by Leontis at all. Leontis literally threatens to burn this woman at one point. And she's like, well, the heathen will be starting the fire, not the woman who burns on it. Peace! And, like, leaves. And everyone's kind of like, oh, God! Leontis then has this moment where he turns to Antigonus and says, you put her up to this, and all the lords are like, no, Antigonus is, nah, Paulina's nuts. Paulina's just a harpy. That's her fault over there. And Leontis seems to accept this. He then looks at the baby, who's been left here, and he's like, I'm not raising another dude's kid. So obviously he hasn't taken Paulina's assurance that the baby is his at all. And says, I'm not raising another person's kid. And for a moment there's some fear because he's just like, might as well just burn her. And you're like, no. And there is sort of this disquiet, and he's like, you know what? I don't want the death of a kid on my head. Antigonus, I want you to take this kid and abandon it somewhere. And Antigonus is like, sure, boss, okay, poor kid, sorry, and leaves with the baby. And you're just kind of like, all of you are terrible. All of you are terrible. And we close out Act 2 fully, so the baby's gone off. We now have some concern about the baby. But the other concern is the fact that the two messengers that Leontis sent to the Oracle of Delphi have now returned. It's apparently been 23 days. And they come back, and Leontis is like, excellent, I can finally put my wife Hermione on trial. And that's how we end the act. All of you are terrible! There is so much that we can say about this scene, but I'm going to try and stick again to the broader strokes, because I find this play really interesting for how it does speak to the larger political, social, and literary issues that we see even today. There's a lot of tropes happening here that I think needs some unpacking. So, let's start with the fact that we have now had Paulina confirmed as an ally to the Queen. So we did have this concern last video when Paulina first shows up, seeming to be a sympathetic ear, but we've got that concern of how many people are playing the two-faced position. Because we've already had several people who have been in that position. Leontis seemingly acting like a husband and friend to Polonus, and turns out, no, he hates both of them and kind of wants them to die. Because obviously they're sleeping with each other. We then have Carmillo, who seems to play the good servant to Leontis and even offers to kill Paulinus, and then ends up telling Paulinus and flees with him. So Paulina coming in this moment, we're kind of like, ooh, we've got two, again, tropes of women in our head that could be applicable here. And it was a question of whether or not we're going to have the strong woman who relates to the Queen through womanhood and through this being in this terrible position of needing to be the subservient wife and concerned for this child, or are we going to get like that seductress harpy woman who's gonna like oust the Queen and be like, look, obviously not your kid, take me as your wife. Like, it's weird, but that's definitely two of the big tropes that we get, especially when we're looking at a story where we do have royal families involved, right? And that's usually true of the men as well. We've either got men who are perfectly fine in their positions of semi-power that is not the ultimate power, and are willing to help their king because they're loyal and good friends with this person, or you've got that person who really wants to be in a position of power and is willing to act like the friend and stab you in the back. Richard III, because that's the other Shakespearean one we've done in this series. And so having Paulina come in this moment, there's some real concern, except Shakespeare sort of throws this all for a loop with the fact that she comes in with a group of people, including her husband. And the moment you sort of realize that, you're like, okay, I don't think this is then her busting in to be like, I've ousted the Queen for sleeping around. She's admitted everything to me. Love me, king. No, like, her husband's right there. But I think very few people are expecting just the vitriol that Paulina comes in with. At least at the time that this is being written and performed. Because, I mean, nowadays, you read this scene and you're just high-fiving every lady. Just like, yep, I'm with you, love you, girl, I believe in you, I support you, you're valid. Because that's Paulina coming in just in this absolute rage at somebody who's abusing their power on both the political and the personal level. Because she does not care that Leontis is king right now, right? Like, she has no fear of the fact that this man could kill her if he wanted to. He threatens to, and just the snappy response of the heretic will be lighting the flame, not burning on it. That's a woman who has seen such an injustice in this situation that she will throw herself on the cogs and wheels. She will die in this moment to show not Leontis, but every other person in that room, and of course, as a character then, every person reading or watching this play. That this is something that you need to be able to do. You need to stand up to people in power when they're wrong. And not just they made a mistake, whoops. Like abusing their power and it's going to get other people killed wrong. So Paulina in this moment is superstar of the play because she comes in, she doesn't care about her position. She doesn't care that she is supposed to be a servant to this king. She doesn't care if she's supposed to be submissive to her own husband. She comes in and says, I have something to say, and I'm going to say it, and damn the consequences. But what's really kind of awful about this moment is the realization of how, unfortunately, ineffectual Paulina is as a singularity. Because that's precisely what she is in a performance like this. And you're always going to have to, unfortunately, limit yourself to the pages of the text. From the curtain opening to the curtain closing, you're going to have to limit yourself there. Because Paulina, of course, can be viewed in a much wider range of historical, societal, and literary women. Where suddenly Paulina is not a singularity, she is in fact one of many women who are making this push for equality. And that's precisely what Paulina is doing. She is coming in to point out to Leontis that he's only getting away with this because he has the power. That Hermione is a good person, has been a good wife, has been a good mother. She doesn't deserve this. And Leontis is only able to do this because he has power over Hermione. So she is in this broader movement. She's in this broader context. But within the play, of course, she is very limited in what she can do. And within the play, it is a limitation to herself and her own bodily autonomy. She can die for this belief. But you'll notice that in coming in, Leontis doesn't change his mind. He doesn't listen to Paulina and say, yes, I was mistaken about my daughter, or I was mistaken about my wife. Paulina wins nothing for either of these other women. But she has shown that, one, she won't be silent about it, and two, that she will handle the consequences if it comes to that. She doesn't take the threat and lie down and say, sorry, I shouldn't have done it, I got emotional, I'm an emotional woman. Which, again, to keep yourself safe in a situation like this, most people would find that perfectly acceptable. Play the part you need to survive. But we're seeing the other side of that argument too. How many people have to throw themselves on the cogs and the wheels, or unfortunately get thrown on by other people before something changes? Because Paulina is one lady here, but we also have to think about Hermione. And the fact is, Hermione is also a singularity in this fight for female equality, with the fact that she is being thrown under the bus here. How many people in minorities have to be brutalized, have to be treated with injustice? How many of them have to die before changes are made? How many babies have to be abandoned? And that's one of the awful things to realize, again, in a smaller text, especially when you're facing down a world where this is still happening to minorities all of the time. All of the time. To suddenly be faced with the fact that you can have some really powerful people in these minorities. Not necessarily in positions of power. Like, Paulina isn't in a position of power here. Hermione is, and she's still getting tried for adultery. But Paulina is a powerful character. She says what needs to be said. And still get nowhere. You can have voices of a generation speak out for things. But what The Winter's Tale, and this scene in particular, is highlighting is those singularities need support. And what's even more apparent is those singularities need support by the dominant cultural group. None of the men in this scene, even Antigonus, her husband, none of the men of this scene step up and say Paulina's right. Now, we get a little lip service to it from Antigonus. At one point, the entire time, Leontis is half telling Paulina to shut up, and half telling Antigonus to control his wife. And Antigonus at one point says, if you hang any man who can't control his wife, you're gonna lose most of your community. Which again is an issue, a barb in and of itself, right? Because the men are the community, the women are just an addition. So we get a little bit, but we don't get a man then standing up beside Paulina and saying, she's right. You are not treating your wife appropriately. She's right. And admittedly, to be able to do something like that, you need to let the people speaking be from that minority group. But you need to put them on a pedestal. You need to put a microphone in them. You need to get that soapbox ready, and you need to get the crowd to shut up and listen. Because that's precisely what Shakespeare is showing in the scene. There is a woman here standing there saying, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you abusing your power against somebody who can't fight against you? And everybody else is either shouting Paulina down or terribly quiet. Because all the other men are willing to defend Antigonus. When Leontis turns to him and says, you put her up to this, all the other men say, no. No, we know Antigonus is fine. Paulina's just a harpy. If one man had turned around and supported Paulina, would we have seen a difference? Or is Leontis so far gone that he's not figuring this out? And interestingly enough, Mamilius is another question in the air. Because oftentimes with these changes happening between social groups, we're seeing it as the younger generations coming in. Seeing the faults of their older generations and saying, I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to be different. I'm going to be better. Mamilius, with the fact that he's deeply, deeply upset by this issue, well, we hope it's not for the reasons Leontis thinks, where he's just realized how terrible all women are, and that his mother's a whore. But to realize how unfair the situation is, that his mother can't defend herself. Because Leontis is the king. Leontis is the king, and Hermione is a woman, and his wife. I find it absolutely fascinating to place this moment in just the greater context of social movements and say, keep fighting. You might feel ineffectual, and I really hate to say it, but sometimes you will be. And for those of you in a position of the dominant social class, if you see injustice, hold the microphone out for somebody. Tell them you are listening, and then actually listen. Do not be the men of this scene. Don't be Antigonus who will tell the baby, I'm really sorry, I've got to abandon you. I know it's wrong. And then actually abandon the kid. If you see something wrong, get the soapbox and let that group speak. Support them. Make some changes. Certainly don't be Leontis, who's just like, women, get out of here! And I hate to say it, but we're only partway through. I don't think this trial is going to go the way we hope it will. You kind of hope that everybody's going to figure it out at this point, but we're going to see. Also, stop abandoning kids. Do me a great favor and stop abandoning kids. The sheer amount, it's a literary trope now of, I don't want infanticide on my head, so just abandon the kid in a field. You're still actively killing the kid then. I mean, the literary trope is somebody else picks up the kid and they probably raised it a whole lot better than you did. But stop doing that. Stop doing that. I'm going to keep reading. We are heading on to Act 3, and next video will be Scenes 1 and 2 for Act 3. Yeah, we seem to be dividing it up that way. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to keep reading, I hope you do too. See you next time.